Much has been said about the toxicity of Twitter, but isn't it just filling the vacuum that has been left through the absence of an effective fourth estate holding our leaders to account following the changes in media ownership laws? Aren't memes just the political cartoons and citizen reporters just the investigative journalists of the modern era?
Yeah, Paul, it's certainly, we're living in an era where someone with a phone can be a filmmaker, a photographer, someone with a blog can be a journalist. And the democratisation of voices, while it can be a rough space, we're hearing from a lot of people that we didn't hear from before.
Well, that's very true, and I think some of them, most of them, we shouldn't be hearing from. It gets overwhelming. At the moment, there's an incredible tirade that's happening with David Chappelle and Hannah Gadsby.
Whether Dave Chappelle should be cancelled. He'd said some things about Hannah Gadsby not particularly being funny, I think was one of the references.
He wasn't funny, which is an old trope about women, and it's incredibly offensive. Hannah is an extraordinary writer. I think we should be proud of her and her work. Nanette was a global sensation. But comedy, like all the arts we're talking about, it's very subjective. You like what you like and certain people don't. And having one of the most powerful male comics in the world sort of punching down at Hannah, I think is phenomenal. And that has awoken all these people on Twitter who are agreeing with him. Not a lot of comedians I've noticed or people that actually know her work. A lot of it is just people attacking, and it's pretty vile. But he's given it air and it will keep going for quite some time.
Is this, Tim, are you familiar with the Dave Chappelle furor at the moment? And
I've avoided it as much as I can. I mean, yes, I'm familiar with it because it's everywhere, but
Is it someone being an agent provocateur, do you think? Is it deliberately... Is he trying to make a point about how far can I go before I get cancelled to make a point about cancel culture?
On his particular thing because I've only got enough bandwidth. And so I pick my Twitter battles to follow, and that one I chose not to. I've been following many other things. But I think these kinds of... It's not just them talking, it's millions of other people talking. And that's what's changed now. That's what's changed with social media. And as Paul said, maybe a lot of those people we shouldn't be speaking of. Now, I don't know how you would measure it, but I'd suggest that like Twitter is probably a net loss for humanity. For the good things that it's enabled, for the democratisation, for the revolutions perhaps that it's influenced, I think there's been so much toxic discourse that's been put on there. And part of that is because it's built in a way to push our brains' buttons, to feed our desire for outrage and doom.
You say we're addicted to outrage.
We are addicted.
Your book,
yeah, we're addicted to it. So I talk a lot about like the way we evolved and like, you know, we got like a sweet tooth. We can blame our primates for that. And that probably wasn't so bad, our primate ancestors for that, but it wasn't so bad for them. It was really hard for them to get obese. But we're now in an environment surrounded by sweet treats. It's really hard. We have to stop ourselves, and we're not very good at using willpower to stop it.
I don't often do that, I've got to say.
Yeah, but the same thing has occurred with outrage. Outrage is a very powerful moral emotion that encourages us to call out wrongdoing and intervene and stop it. But when it's on social media, we are flooded with a torrent of outrageous events. And we don't have... It pushes our buttons, but we don't have the same means to actually do anything positive about it.
Bri, are we flooded by it, or does it seem like it? Do we hear? Is it so loud, the anger on there, that we hear that we miss everything else that's happening, and we miss the voices that are being heard that don't always get heard? We miss the civility. We miss the genuine conversation because it is drowned out by what may be at the extremes a lot of the noise. I wonder about that.
I think the power of the internet to allow previously disempowered and disenfranchised individuals to collectivise is something that we cannot afford to underestimate, ever. What I believe is that there is an overdue conversation about the toxicity of something like, let's use Twitter specifically, but also social media more generally. Yes, individuals behave in a toxic way towards each other. I'm much more interested in asking who are the multi-billionaires who create toxic environments to foster the worst in us. And the evidence that's coming out, especially in America at the moment, in the Senate
Facebook.
about Facebook, and the fact that it is a It's not an accidental or unfortunate byproduct of Facebook that people get toxic with each other. That is a core component of the way it operates. The toxicity for young people, young women in particular, but young people in general, about body image and the use of Instagram, that's not an accidental, unfortunate byproduct. That is a part of the modus operandi of these huge businesses that make a small number of people an extreme amount of money. If we're going to talk about toxicity of social media, let's actually pick the big guys up top instead of taking each other down.
Yeah, like outrage has been commodified. I don't necessarily think we've been addicted to it, because I think if you're from a marginalised community, you have a lot to be outraged by. And things on like social media, the solidarity and the voice that you can find there is a really good tool in order to create change. And we've seen that through things like the solidarity around the world with Black Lives Matter. And then when we say it's toxic to who? Because I just want to say, in speaking, you know, you talked about Dave Chappelle and being like, has Dave Chappelle been cancelled? Dave Chappelle is a very rich man who got paid to do that Netflix comedy, talking about trans people. Now we talk about, you know, like what is the ramifications in real life?
Is it cancelling or is it just accountability?
Is it accountability? Because essentially he was punching down on trans people. The most vulnerable trans people are trans people of colour. Our brothers and sisters stand, who he was punching down on. So who cares if he's cancelled? Who cares if the discourse around him is toxic? Because the people who actually have to live the ramifications of that type of hate speech, like, that's inequality.
And actually the only person I'm aware of that's actually been cancelled in terms of losing their job, wasn't it a trans-identifying person who worked at Netflix who leaked the documents to try and bring attention to the situation?
Nakkiah, you found yourself in a situation recently, didn't you? And I wanted to just explore this and the sequence of events with the Pauline Hanson interview done by Jessica Rowe, and I believe you were one of a few people who had said, you know, who had criticised that. That was subsequently taken down. But then what happened afterwards?
So I had a conversation with, it was really funny because about like a week earlier I'd had like a few wines and been like, I'm taking down my Twitter because I haven't been on for ages, because I do think in a way, like for myself, as someone with a platform, it can be a really toxic place to be, but it has its value. So when we go, oh, we don't want to throw great out, like the baby out with the bathwater, the same can be said for social media. I think we throw these buzzwords around like toxic, and it's like, what does it actually mean? What is the lived reality of people engaging with these mediums? But how that kind of went down is Jessica Rowe is a very dear, like a friend of mine, someone who I very much respect. I did a podcast with Pauline Hanson. There was a lot of criticism online, so I thought, okay, I wrote one tweet, I think it was 2 tweets, very, you know, for me, I thought it was fairly calm and articulate. I just said, look, I don't know if this is necessarily what you... Do you want to associate yourself with this?
Did you want her to take it down?
No, I said, it's up to you. I was like, maybe you take it down, but really it's up to you. But here is my opinion. Let's have a discourse about it. Anyway, Jess ended up making the decision to take the podcast down, which was her decision. But then what ensued was that outrage commodification. It was on the news. There were... mainly, I feel like getting nervous even talking about this because I don't know what the onslaught's going to be. I guess more conservative right-wing media. For 2 tweets, I really thought, like, out of everything that I've done in my career, that would be the least a kind of thing that would get attention. And I had people send me messages. I can pull out my phone and read some of them. You get called an abo, an idiot, a piece of shit. That was one of the... That's what I've, like, that's that... that's that kind of outrage commodification. I did not expect it, and it really took me by surprise.
And people accusing you of also engaging
of censorship, and it's like I didn't like it.
But did Pauline Hanson just?
Well, I think what we need to remember though is censorship is something that's done by a government. I think we're allowed to go, hey, you did something, I don't agree. Also, that's not censorship. You can't. That's just someone disagreeing with you. And I think out of all people, Pauline Hanson should be, you know, the leniency she takes over people's rights. She should be, the words she throws at other people, she should be able to
But you weren't saying take it down. You would have been happy for it
I suggested. I said, maybe you should, but it's up to you. But what ended up happening was, and this is when I want to go to cancel culture, the way we use this in outrage, as if these are new things. I sat in the shower one morning and I was crying because I'd been getting these messages saying that I was worthless, I should kill myself, all these things. And I sat in my shower. I'm in my 30s. I'm a fairly privileged person, and I cried. I didn't want to exist. I've struggled with self-harm and depression my entire life. You know, from when kids would call me the fat abo and throw their fruit at me off the bus at school. And I sat there. And what I did is I went on social media and I just started writing because, you know, this is like, that was the only thing I could do is this is my voice, you're not going to take it away. And I don't know, and the response I got was really overwhelming, and it, you know, if I hadn't gone to social media, I wouldn't have gotten that response. But then I thought, hey, like, these feelings of feeling worthless, of people calling you names, these aren't new, Nakkiah. I spoke to my parents. I'm sure you have as well, Stan. They've also had those things. They've said to me, my mum has said to me, a woman in her 60s who has had a rich career, amazing person, she said, sometimes I feel worthless as an Aboriginal person in this country, and I too have thought about self-harm. So this thing of like outrage and cancel culture exists because we live in a colonial nation that is built on cancelling people. It's just I think what we do is we see marginal people and we call them a cultural problem when they dare to say anything back.
Well, those things don't define you, and I think you know that. And, you know, those people don't define you.
But to an extent, though, they do. That is, to an extent. I'm the only person here on the Q&A website where they have maybe except for you, sorry, Stan, where on this panel today, they said a Gomeroi Torres Strait Islander woman. I'm not ashamed of being Aboriginal, but we're defined by colonial people, by whiteness, telling us that we're Aboriginal. We don't call, you know, white Mr. John Bell. I can if you like. But it's like, why? So this idea that we get to pick in and out of these things that define us, I don't think it's necessarily correct. It gives us way more autonomy then.
I might just finish with you, Paul.
Sorry.
No, thank you, Chair. I may just speak to you, Paul, just as someone who's a satirist as well. How do you navigate that line between what is outrage, what is genuinely the cause of outrage and rightful outrage, and what is toxic, what is hateful?
I've never experienced anything like what Nakkiah is talking about. I'm once again an example of privilege. I've had an extraordinary easy run through life. As someone I get up on stage, I don't feel terrified of speaking my mind when I'm on stage. I don't worry if I upset people, but I don't come from a different, culture. I just do what I do. But it's very different for other people in this group. And we all approach it differently. We all try and overcome. We all try and express our art, and expressing art and sharing it is what I think we're all trying to do, and trying to get to a better point with humanity, all of humanity, even the people that are a bit.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, like, I think it was a column by Bolt, I think, where he quoted a role that Deb Melbourne plays in the ABC TV show Total Control. And instead of saying that the character said this quote, he said it as Deb Mailman said that quote. That's very clearly taken out of context. That's happened to me, where I've been in comedy sketches and the stuff that I've said is attributed to me as saying
rather
that.
than the performance or
as
role.
a performance. And that's what I mean. I think there needs to be a lot of accountability to the media companies who are commodifying that outrage and being able to create division and not allow people. We're talking a lot about duality and complexity to people. I think, we really still are fighting for that, a lot of people.